Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and everyone in between, and welcome to my poor taste in music. None of my friends ever give me the aux on long car rides, because if they did, they would very quickly stop being my friends. Clearly, I need cooler friends that like actually good music like System of a Down. That's what the video's about. I'm ranking the System of a Down albums. Just the obligatory reminder, this video is just my opinion, so of course feel free to disagree with anything that I say, just please keep it respectful to avoid damaging my fragile self-esteem. Before we begin, if you don't already hate the sound of my voice, you might as well subscribe. If you don't, you'll be forsaking me in your eyes, thoughts, and hearts, and that wouldn't be very nice of you. I didn't include the father part. I don't want to call you guys daddy, that would be weird. Also, if this video tickles your fancy, you can find a link at the end to the last time I did something metal-related. It was a vocal cover. Alright, let's get into this shit. Starting at the bottom of my list, we've got Storaged Melodies. I know it's not an official album, but if they went through the trouble of getting Wu-Tang to give Surge the end pass for a couple of these songs, I think it deserves a shout out. Honestly, this album isn't really that bad. I really love their Snowblind cover, and Shame was pretty good too. I really just found the album to be a little bit all over the place, and to me it just wasn't that memorable. I will say, hearing System of a Down do rap and rap-adjacent music is pretty fun, and I might just be ranking it low because I haven't listened to it enough to really appreciate it. Even though I'm putting it at the bottom, I'd still recommend you go check it out if you haven't. Moving up to the second to last slot on my list is Steal This Album. I've heard that stores don't like to sell physical media of this one, probably because they're worried it might get stolen, but I actually saw one on vinyl in a record store near my house. I didn't steal it because it was too big to put up my ass and walk out of the store with. Also because I'm a law-abiding citizen who would never engage in theft. As far as the music, this album is often considered the lesser outtakes from Toxicity, which is something that the band denies as far as I can tell. From what I understand, their writing method for Toxicity was a quantity over quality sort of approach, and then they just picked the best songs for the actual album. So if this album is indeed made up of outtakes from that writing process, it makes sense that they wouldn't be quite as, well, good. Don't get me wrong, I love Chicken Stew and Bubbles and even New Guns, but this album just doesn't have the same magic as Toxicity or the same melodic quality as their later work, which is why I'm putting it all the way down here. Speaking of their later, more melodic work, right here on the list is where I'm going to put Hypnotized. Hypnotized and Mesmerized very much feel like a continuity of the same album, which makes sense because they basically are. That being said, this is really the band's pretentious era, where, in my opinion, they started taking themselves a little too seriously. Don't get me wrong, they're talented musicians who deserve to be taken seriously, but their earlier work sounds like they're cutting loose a little more, and by reining themselves in here, I think they lose some of that chaotic quality that I love so much. And of these two albums, I'd say that Hypnotized is the more pretentious one. And to be clear, it's not a matter of the messages they're making. They've made serious points on other albums that I much prefer the sound of. I'm just talking about their sound, and in my opinion, you can hear the self-indulgence dripping from tracks like Soldier Side and Hypnotized. Obviously, I don't hate it, I'm just putting it below some of the other albums because I feel like everything I've just mentioned keeps me from enjoying it more. Now, this might be a little weird, but with my next spot on the list, I'm breaking up the Mesmerized Hypnotized saga. I'm putting a restraining order between them. They can't be right next to each other on the list. And filling the gap between these two is Protect the Land / Genocidal Humanoids, the 2020 release that I'm not sure whether to call a single, an album, an EP, or just a fustercluck. In a lot of ways, this album has the same vibes as Hypnotized and Mesmerized, which is why it's going in between them. This one goes above Hypnotized for me because, for one, it's just a little bit more refined. It just sounds a little bit cleaner, and when that's what they're going for, it works pretty well. I also just really like the main riff on Protect the Land and the vocals on the verse of Genocidal Humanoids. Being the devil, we never run from the devil, we never summon the devil. I don't know, it's just fun. Honestly, that's what informs a lot of my music taste. Above that on my list is gonna have to be Mesmerized, which, I'm not gonna say is entirely because of BYOB, but it doesn't hurt. Honestly, this album just feels a lot more fun and intense and a little less pretentious than Hypnotized, while still bringing in some of the more refined songwriting. I really like the time signature switches in question, the absolute ridiculousness of the lyrics in Figaro, and of course the general awesomeness of BYOB. Honestly, this album just has more songs that are fun to sing along to than the others in the era, and in my book that counts for a lot. Now, this may be a controversial take, I genuinely don't know, but the second slot is where I'm going to put System of a Down's Self-Titled album. Remember what I said before about the intensity and the chaotic energy that old System of a Down had? This album is that at its peak. This album feels like all of the drugs I haven't tried because I'm a goody two-shoes and care about my health. This album really just has so many bangers. I mean, Sweet Pea, No, Devil, Soil, War, Hubert, Darts, Pluck, I love all of them. And Sugar, of course. Can't forget about the Sugar! All of these songs just get me headbanging more than anything else in System of a Down's discography. This is Surge's vocals at their most intense, Darren's guitar at its most coked out. It's just so much fun to listen to. Of course, though, there is one album in particular that beats it out. Beats it off? But what? Huh? What words? Of course, though, there is one album in particular that beats it. I think you all knew this was coming, but of course, the top slot has to go to Toxicity. In 2001, System of a Down released this, Toxicity, their most accomplished album. I've never even seen American Psycho, I just like Ice Nine Kills. Genuinely, though, every song in this album just sounds so full and so fun and just has so much energy behind it. It really strikes that balance for me between their earlier chaos and their later refinement, and I think that's why it's one of my all-time favorite albums. I think their undisputed masterpiece is Chop Suey, a song so catchy that most people probably usually don't listen to the lyrics. But they should, because it's not just about the nature of life and death. It's also a random excerpt from a book that Rick Rubin grabbed off a shelf in the studio. Yeah, the Bridge of Chop Suey is supposedly from a random book they just happened to grab off a shelf in Rick Rubin's house. It just happened to fit the song really well. To avoid the normie options like Chop Suey, Aerials, or Toxicity, I'd have to say my favorite track off this album has gotta be Shimmy. It's fast-paced and fun to sing along to, which, as we've established, gets my caveman brain really going. But every song on this album is great. They all sound distinct and intense and engaging and just generally exciting and fun to listen to. We don't talk about Arto, that one doesn't exist. Overall, I don't think there's a truly bad System of a Down album. They all bring something interesting to the table, and at the end of the day, I've listened to their entire discography more times than I can count. And with that being said, I think that's gonna do it for today. Once again, feel free to disagree with me in the comments. Just try to keep it polite so you don't damage my fragile self-esteem. The link I mentioned before should be on screen now, so check that out if you feel like it. And as always, thank you so much for watching, ladies and gentlemen, and everyone in between. And always remember to stay happy, stay healthy, and most importantly, stay humble, because when it comes down to it, we are all just airheads. Have a good night, everyone.